Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Media Monday. I'm Don Armstrong, Director of Student Media, and joining us tonight is Jon Schwartz, a strategic communicator, he's also a professor at the New York University's Tisch Institute for Global Sport. And my goodness, what hasn't he done? He's served as Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs for the National Football League. Spent more than 7 years as a marketing communications leader for NASCAR. I really thank you very much, Mr. Schwartz, for taking the time to join us this evening.
I am humbled and honored to join all of you this afternoon or this evening, and I look forward to the conversation. Go Bucks!
Thank you very much. Could you kind of kick us off just by telling us a little bit about your background, kind of your journey as a strategic communicator, and how you kind of navigated through everything you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I started my journey at the University of Maryland, where I had a chance to be part of the journalism school. And through that experience, I was able to land a couple of internships with National Hockey League teams in Washington and Pittsburgh. And what that did when I was a sophomore and a junior was really, I caught the bug for working big time. And for those of you who are upperclassmen who are either working or interning, or hopefully you're a paid internship, you know what I mean. You could relate that, working and seeing the end goal and either getting paid for it in hours or internships or credits is something that is drives you because you can see your future. That's where I was. And so you are looking at a college dropout. I left school early because I wanted to chase the dream of working in hockey. There was a minor league hockey team that was hiring a director of public relations. This was back before email, so I was sending FedEx packages to the owner's home. I was showing up and knocking on his door. I was calling. I was sending faxes. For those of you who know what faxes are, I'm kidding. And he finally said, "Listen, if you stop annoying me, I'll give you the job." The job paid $15,000 a year. And it probably paid about $2.25 an hour when you factor in all the hours I worked. Now, before you cast judgment on me, I did slowly finish up my degree, and I think you all should do the same. But it really thrust me into sports, and from there, I ended up working for an arena football league team, the first iteration from the XFL, the one with Vince McMahon and NBC Sports and the WWE. I had a stop at a big New York City PR agency where I had a chance to work on all these big consumer brands that sponsored sports like Reebok and MasterCard and Texaco. And then I spent 8 or 9 years in-house at 3 public companies, all of which were sports sponsors, all of which were very, very different. So I worked for a consumer products company in Connecticut, which they sponsored bull riding and rodeo and drag racing. And I worked for 2 major global financial institutions in MasterCard and at Bank of America, both at the height of the Great Recession. And from there, I had a chance to go work the last 10 years at NASCAR and the NFL, which was a great experience working for those 2 great leagues. For those of you who are NASCAR fans, and or even if you're not, the sport is amazing. And then working for the NFL and working directly for the commissioner Roger Goodell was a dream come true. It was an amazing experience. And sort of on the side, I teach 2 courses at NYU, like Professor Armstrong said. I teach an undergraduate course, and I teach a graduate course at NYU. Where the class is actually a mini agency, is a mini media agency. We have clients, and big clients will come in, like the New York Jets said, "Hey, we have a problem reaching Gen Zs. Go solve the problem." So the class spent the whole semester solving the problem. They came up with an esports tournament. The Jets ran the esports tournament, paid for the esports tournament, got a sponsor for the esports tournament. They actually really did the idea that the students came up with. And our client is a big global brand this semester that we're working with on a great project. And then lastly, I'm the chairman of a nonprofit organization called the American Special Hockey Association, provides children and adults with physical fitness and socialization through the sport of hockey, all of whom who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And lastly, and then I'll promise I'll shut up, Professor, I am the host of a podcast called the Sports Mentoring Project. And I'll be happy to talk a little bit about that when the time is right.
All right, fantastic. Let me make a note for sure to ask about that when we get to it. Well, of course, what's dominated most of these conversations during this year, of course, I have to ask about it because I would find it fascinating to hear from your take. Could you take us through the trajectory of how COVID-19 has impacted your work? And I don't know if you were still working for the NFL at the time when this started, but could you kind of talk about some of that and just in general? I just think that would be really, again, really fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, and it goes all the way back to February, right? When February a year ago, when you started to hear rumblings about the coronavirus. And this was before Super Bowl. And there was little whispers at the Super Bowl in Miami that, there's this virus going on. You never really know. Little did we know, Miami Super Bowl was probably a super spreader event, if you think about it, right? I mean, I took my family down there. When the coronavirus really landed, when it hit Plymouth Rock, right? And the NBA canceled their season, whatever it was, helped me March 12th or 13th or somewhere in there last year. It was right around the time when the NFL was doing free agency. Now, free agency is not a sporting event. It's not a live event. It's not a event where you can show up and cheer or whatever. It's basically transactions between coaches or GMs and teams and players, assigning them, signing and reassigning and cutting and things like that. And there was so much criticism of the NFL for even moving forward with that at the time, because everything stopped. Everybody froze. Everybody didn't know what to do. So that was back in the window where we were actually planning for the NFL draft. And so the draft, which was, we began to plan in earnest for a draft that was completely virtual, with players and coaches and GMs and prospects and broadcasters and the commissioner, sitting in their homes like we are and doing the draft, not in person. And there was a lot of speculation as to whether, how we would do it. There was a lot of skepticism whether we'd pull it off and whether people would give a crap. Like, would people even tune in to this made for TV event with a draftathon and commissioners is in his basement eating M&Ms? It's, and it was really very, very unpredictable. And oh, by the way, ESPN and ABC, the team that had the top pick. Anybody who know who that was last year? Who had the top pick in the draft last year? Number one pick in the draft? Anybody?
No idea.
No idea. The Cincinnati Bengals and the NFL. We all had, the good news is we all had plans for the draft. The bad news is
Joe Burrow, right?
Burrow, that's right.
Okay. All right.
So all these groups, the team, the league, the broadcaster, the city, it was supposed to be in Cleveland, or it was supposed to be in Las Vegas. Every group had a plan, which was great, but nobody was sharing the plans. And in some cases, the plans were conflicting with one another. You couldn't have that if you're doing the first ever virtual draft. So anyway, long story less long, I led an initiative. It was the largest and most inclusive tune-in campaign ever. We did an old-fashioned, what is the data telling us? The data is telling us this: Americans are experiencing news overload. One, that it's too much news. And two, they don't know who to trust, particularly cable news, right? Really, local news began to sort of rise in reputation. Why? Because they had the most accurate local data. But in reality, people needed a distraction. People wanted to watch sports. They wanted to watch football because everything was gone. And so we took data from the year before and said, what markets were traditionally have increased interest in the NFL draft, but for some reason they went down the year before? What markets was the most fandom among African Americans, the most fandom among Latinx, and the markets where the prospects hailed from? And we took all those markets and we identified 41 different markets that we were going to go out and target. And we got ESPN and the clubs and everyone to align around this plan. And we deployed 76 people, executives, players, draft picks, GMs, spokespeople, network people, and we just started doing interviews in all these markets. We also created this this digital marketing tool called the Guide to the Virtual Draft, which was literally, here's what it's going to look like, here's what it's going to feel like. Think about a press release, only digital. It had video and pictures and graphics, and it really sort of brought to life, here's what you can expect from the viewing experience. And so we did all this great stuff. And in the end, we were able to drive ratings increases in 39 of those 41 markets, which was really double the ratings growth in those markets than all the other markets we measured with. And I can tell you that having an integrated campaign and having a media group and a television network, an NFL network, and a partner in ESPN and ABC that was aligned around a single plan was really a testament to how sports can adapt to a changing landscape. And if we hadn't had one centralized plan, the draft would have gone fine. It really, truly would have. The technology was great, et cetera. But would we have had those same results? Would we have met consumers where they were consuming? Would we have known and prepared the fans to sort of pre-engineer what they were going to expect? And would they have tuned in to the degree they did? I don't know. I like to think that they probably wouldn't. And having a plan was really important.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And kind of continued on that same line. Well, first of all, this is kind of a two-parter. Could you talk a little bit about how you defined what a strategic communicator does exactly? And secondly, when we're on the other side, and I can repeat this if I need to, but when we're on the other side of this pandemic, and hopefully we're getting closer to that, what do you foresee as permanent changes as they relate to the strategic communication field?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't know if anyone has the ability to turn their camera on or turn their mute button off, but I would ask for a second, how many of you are in communications and or PR or interested in going into that field? Anyone interested in media relations, PR, communications?
I think we're mostly journalism.
Journalism? Okay,
yeah.
You want to be reporters? Yep. Okay. That's great. So, I think your question about strategic communications, I think there's a difference between being a great PR person, someone who generates news coverage, placements, stories, and someone who is a 5-tool player. Where are my baseball fans? By show of hands, or shout out if you're a baseball fan. Okay. So Don, if I told you, if I said, hey, you know what, you are a 5-tool player. Do you know what the 5 tools are? Baseball.
Let's see. Run, hit, catch, defend, hit for power.
Yep.
And
throw.
Yeah.
That's it. Those are the 5 tools. And I think a strategic communication person also has 5 tools. You need to be able to write, number one. If you can't write and be concise with your thoughts and be able to write persuasively, you're up the creek. You need to be able to go out and do your traditional media outreach and media relations and pitching. you need to be strategic, you need to have the ability to integrate, and you need to be good in a crisis situation. And I think being a strategic communications person is more than just going out and, spinning stories or getting coverage. It's about putting together a plan that positions your organization to capitalize on the news cycle the way you decide it. Now, years ago, sports teams and leagues, and NASCAR is a great example. And actually, maybe Eastern Tennessee State is a good example. I don't know, but a lot of universities have something called a public information office. Now, if you're in journalism, you're very familiar with the PIO, right? Public Information Office. It's where news and information emanates out from, that funnels through the university to a person or department, and that person or department is in charge with pushing out information. Critically important, and I'm not looking down my nose on it. Critically important function. However, that is not strategic communications, just pushing out news and information. When and where news information gets pushed out, what channels, and by who, and coordinated with certain times or different parts of the school, all of that stuff, having a plan around when you're going to make an announcement or launch an initiative or weigh in on the conversation or issue a statement, that's strategic communications. So if you're a journalist, and you're probably going to need to work with communications people or PR people. And, for the most part, I think we're all smart, well-intended people who are strategic. However, there are some people in our field that are just very old school. You put out news and information, and you expect journalists to pick it up verbatim. I'll give you an example. Does anyone know when the first press release was put out? First ever press release was put out. It was put out by a company and a PR person at a company. His name was Ivy Lee, and he worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Now, back in 114 years ago, in the early 20th century, the Pennsylvania Railroad had a terrible accident. A commuter train went into the water outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey, and 50 people died. Now, Ivy Lee was the one who was responsible he was in the PIO, right? And he called the media down to the crash site. He explained what was happening. He explained the souls that were lost. He expressed, he sent thoughts and prayers on behalf of the company, and explained this is an active investigation, folks. So, we don't have much to say. But after that media briefing, he did something for the very first time. He handed out his first press release. And the press release was words on a page, text words on a page. Some top, it said maybe for immediate release, or, from the Pennsylvania Railroad. Now, the very next day, guess what happened? The New York Times picked the press release up verbatim, word for word. Now, for those of you who are journalism students out there, and you picked up a press release and you printed it word for word, your editor would likely have your head, right? The editor is not, it's like cutting and pasting, it's not plagiarizing. It wouldn't be wrong, but how about doing some job? How about collecting some of your own information, adding some analytics around it, some commentary, right? But this is back then, this was pretty novel. Okay. Has anyone seen a press release? Just go off mute and say, yeah, I've seen a press release. Yes. Okay. What do press releases look like today? They look like words on a page. They look the same. 114 years, and there has been no evolution of press releases. And so I say this to say when I was at the NFL, we were trying to convey ideas and campaigns. And today, what's king? Content is king, right? You're never putting out news and information, even PIO office. They're never putting out information, just a text. There's always a picture, a logo, a video, a tweet, an Instagram post, a TikTok, something, right? Or a news story in the website. I mean, I had the Bucks here up. Look at this thing. I mean, that's a pretty cool app. That is, press releases don't just live alone anymore, right? Yet here we are. Okay, let's put out a press release. So I created a digital marketing tool. It's basically a moving press release. It's got video and pictures and images and graphics embedded in it. And it shows up in the inbox of a journalist, and it really stands out. I'll give you another example. The president of the Pro Football Writers of America is named Bob Glauber, an award-winning journalist for the New York Newsday, covered the Jets and the Giants for many years. I said, Bob, how many press releases do you get a week? He said, geez, I don't know, maybe about 100. So, okay, 100 from the league and teams. Well, I get it. So you're a pretty busy guy. Yeah. How many of them do you get to open? He's like, oh, geez, John, I probably only get to like 10 of them. Wow, 10? That's 10%. I said, Bob, that you open 10, how many of them do you actually do something with? What do you mean? Well, how many of them do you write something, send out a tweet, follow up with a call, file it for later, maybe a story for later, put it in a file, print it out? He said 1. Now, if I told you that you were in sales and you need to make 100 calls to get 1 sale, how would you feel about that? A lot of salespeople have to make 100 calls to get 1 sale, but think about it this way. If you were sending out a traditional press release that's words on a page, how do you expect to get Bob Glauber's attention? Well, if something it shows up in your inbox and has video and it's moving and it's got the color, the Bucks colors, and that, okay, maybe now you got my attention. It was a little nefarious, but at least you have my attention. It's content plus words. And so I say all this to say is, well, what is strategic communications? It's that. It's using data. I found out that he gets 100 press releases a week and he only does something with 1. How can I come up with an idea to make him open my release over a text-based release? I know, send a video with it. It's not rocket science, but it is strategic. The timing when you're putting something out, to amplify a campaign or initiative or a particular observance throughout the year. So I think that's what's going to continue to evolve. The line between marketing and communications continues to thankfully be more blurred every day. When a company or an entity or university has marketing over here and communications over here, and everyone does a great job, and they've got great people working in the group, diverse people working in the group, and they all work, and they're doing this, they're doing this, and they're doing this, they're lifting, right? A lot of times they're conflicting. The messages are conflicting, right? They're not working together. I'll give you a great example. NASCAR. How many of you by show, just if everybody could come off mute for a second and just shout it out. By show of hands. Those of you, just say yes. I've seen the NASCAR race on TV. Just shout yes or no.
Yes.
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 No.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
No.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, NASCAR. All right, so NASCAR is about to announce a major rules change that's going to impact the future of the racing for the next year. It's going to basically determine whether the races are side by side with close finishes, with cars beating and banging, or one car winning a race by a full lap. What kind of racing would you like to see? The close, tight racing up until the end with beating and banging? Or do you want to see a guy win by half a lap?
The first one.
The first one. Exactly. Thank you, Professor. So this announcement was really big, and the degree to which the fans saw it and embraced it was very, very important. So off the company goes, and they announced this great piece of news and information about how the racing is going to be great, right? Sounds good, right? 90 seconds later, the same company issued the following announcement. News bulletin. NASCAR debuts a brand new product. Dale Earnhardt Jr. branded baby car seat. Get yours now. So at the same time as the major rules announcement, here comes another part of the organization selling a licensed product. Marketing, doing their great job. Comms doing their great job. And off they go. They're lifting. Everybody's doing their job. Kumbaya. Except there's no integration. And when comms and marketing are integrated, not only do you look less foolish, but you have more success and results. And that's what we were working on primarily at NASCAR. That's why I was working on primarily the NFL. And that's why strategic communications is going to continue to play a huge role in how big brands and sports go to market. I'm a pretty animated guy, as you could see. So
It's fantastic. Let's see. Let me ask you one more question, and then I'll open it up and see if we have questions from others on the meeting with us. But could you talk some about your work with the NFL as it relates to social justice issues?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I joined the NFL in let's see, in early 2020 or no, I'm sorry, it was early 2019. And it was 4 years after Colin Kaepernick first took a knee. Now, the league had in those ensuing years, with every year, got better and better in terms of listening to players who are alumni, putting real money towards social justice and social justice issues, and actually doing stuff, acting together with the players, which was great. The challenge was, looking back at when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee, was there was a great misunderstanding around that from the beginning, because there wasn't the funding and the action that immediately followed it. So I'll give you a great example. When Colin first took that knee, I was at NASCAR, and the NFL was getting hammered, not just by the president and by everyone. Colin Kaepernick was getting hammered. Anyone who took a knee was getting hammered. And the teams were all, and the league were all forced to, they're on their back. They're responding. They're public information office, sending out news and information. And there was a lot of criticism on both sides for, what was happening with the NFL, either not acknowledging the reason why Colin was taking a knee, but also, criticism for him taking a knee, particularly from the White House. We all remember this, yes? Yes. Katie's nodding. I'm assuming everybody else does. Okay, so here I am at NASCAR. We have 4,000 white people standing at attention during the national anthem on pit road. And the president is he's heaping praises on NASCAR for doing it the right way. Well, that's the complete opposite of what was happening in the NFL. Who was right? I don't know. There were some black people. There were some people of color on pit road. They're former college athletes. They were hopping over the wall with a tire or a pneumatic air pressure gun and changing tires and working the pit stops. They weren't taking me because they were being threatened by owners that if they do, they'll be on the first Greyhound bus out of there. And we learned so much in those 4 years. And we did a better job listening, and not actively listening, and listening and responding. And so I say all this to say is that the NFL was demonized. Colin Kaepernick was demonized. NASCAR wasn't demonized. At the time, the sport was still flying the Confederate flag. Nothing made any sense because there wasn't as rich of a dialogue as there is now. And so, you know, you would have asked me 4 or 5 years ago, sports and politics don't mix. Yeah, of course. I don't want them mixed. But is it politics or is it social injustice? And I think that's where the conversation started. I understand there are people who are outraged that Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have a job. I think there are merits to both sides of the argument, quite frankly. I'm sure some of you, maybe all of you, would agree. But there was outrage everywhere. And we're in an important period of our life right now. And I think, you know, a good example is I just read this book by Emmanuel Acho called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. It's a book about race and racism. It's a book about being vulnerable enough to ask questions that you're afraid to ask and you're afraid to hear what the answer is. And I think that I would have never read this book. I actually know Emmanuel. He's going to be on my podcast next week. I would have never read this book, which changed my life, had it not been for the intersection of sports and politics. I would have never endeavored to learn about, you know, how, you know, Atticus Finch. Who knows who Atticus Finch is? Katie, who is he?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Emmanuel brings up a good point. Was Atticus Finch a hero? Or was he a white savior who came and saved the day for a Black person of color? And he was the star of the show. And that realization, I arrived at that realization from a guy who played sports, a guy who's a sports commentator, a guy who played in the NFL. This is in my consciousness because of sports. And so you can argue that you don't like sports and politics to mix. You can argue that you don't want to hear, you know, about social justice or injustice, and you don't want to hear about police brutality. My great grandfather was a beat police officer in New York City. I have an extreme amount of respect for him and all people of law enforcement, but we are talking about misbehavior by white police officers. That is the issue. If it's not the issue, it's one of the main issues. So I would not have had that in my consciousness had it not been for Colin Kaepernick, period, full stop. So I don't know where that leaves us. I am sure, and I'd be disappointed if there were people on this call that don't disagree with something I just said, but that's okay. Sports has elevated our consciousness of these issues, and I think it needs to continue to do so. And if you asked me if I felt that way 5 years ago, I would have told you absolutely not.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that answer. Now let me pause just for a second and see if we have questions from others. You can put it in the chat or just unmute and ask it. We're just having a conversation here. So.
This isn't really a question, but if you haven't read the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird, I think it's To Set a Watchman. I think you'd really enjoy it because that sort of, even before like all the conversations about Atticus's character being like a white savior, like you realize in that one that he really wasn't, like he was kind of racist. And I remember reading the second one and being like, oh my gosh, this ruins the first one, but it doesn't ruin the first one. It just like, it's more mature and wakes you up a little bit. But anyways, back to
great.
you and your job.
What's it called again? Say it again. Watchman?
I think to set a watchman, maybe. I honestly think that it might be on my bookshelf. It's not. It's something a watchman. To set a watchman, maybe. But
Thank you.
I would recommend.
Thank you. I'll read it.
And then also my question that is related to your job. I know you've worked with a lot of cool organizations and teams through your job. Do you have any favorites?
Look, it was a dream of mine to work in the NHL and at the NFL, but I, like so many of us, didn't grow up playing NASCAR in my backyard. The fastest way to make $1 million in racing is to start with $10 million. And I didn't have $10 million. It's a sport that loses money, but I will say some of the most interesting, kind, generous, smart, dynamic, diverse, compelling people work around the NASCAR industry, and they are so resilient. What I really enjoyed NASCAR, what I loved about it was, listen, did I love working for the NFL? I did. Why? Because the NFL is clearly the market leader. We'd all agree. In fact, I don't care if you agree. That's a matter of fact. NASCAR is a challenger brand. It's kind of like your school, right? In many ways, right? Your school, you think about Tennessee, you think about Vanderbilt, you think about Tennessee State, you think about Tennessee, right? You don't think about your university, yet you chose to go there because you like to be with a challenger brand, and I love being with a challenger brand like NASCAR, and so I took a lot of pride in that. Like you take a lot of pride in being a Buck, right? So that for me was really good. I also felt like that was one place where I actually had a really big voice and I had a really big seat at the table, and I could really have a big impact there. So I would say my experience in NASCAR was one of my favorites. Go Set a Watchman is the sequel. Got it. Great. Thank you. Great question.
I haven't read it since like high school, but I remember it being like a wake-up call from the first one. So
it's great.
All right. Other questions for Professor Schwartz? If not, I sure have plenty.
Victor's listening to Thunderstruck.
I know it's a cheesy pick, but it's
love it.
All right. Well, we'll see if some of them might think of a question, but let me just ask you, and this kind of plays off Kate's question a little bit. You have tons of experience working for, two of the most prestigious sports leagues in North America. I mean, in the world, really. I mean, I hope everyone realizes this who's on the call. I mean, it just doesn't get bigger than the National Football League. I mean, that's just, what would you say were some of the biggest day-to-day challenges in those roles?
In NASCAR, it was the notion of a 3,200-pound race car going around a racetrack at over 200 miles an hour with this undercurrent of danger threaded throughout everything. Danger to the teams, danger to the pit crew members, danger to the drivers, danger to the spectators. I mean, we had two or three cars going to the stands when I was there. And as somebody who is responsible for the public perception and reputation of NASCAR, and someone who befriended a lot of the people who were behind the wheel personally, working or changing tires on pit road, or my friends and my close friends who I sat with in race control, who was responsible for the safety of those drivers and their teams, that was a challenge. That was where the unimaginable challenges would come in. Braces, brushes with death and injury and loss of life. That part was scary, but it was also rewarding. I mean, NASCAR has the biggest research and development facility in all of sports in the whole world. And the only work that takes place there is making the car safer. They work with NASA and the Army and, you know, the Air Force to share information, other racing series, to make the car safer. And that part was pretty cool. The other big challenge with NASCAR, a lot of people don't know this, is when you work together with someone else, it's always a bad thing. The sport is incentivized to around secrecy and competition at every level. Competing on the racetrack, competing for sponsors in the boardroom, competing for butts and seats among track, and the networking. Nobody works together because they don't care about growing the pie. They care about lining their pockets. They care about beating that other girl or that other guy. And getting the industry to work together was the biggest challenge. We were launching a new race car. We were trying to get a new media rights deal. It required all the stakeholders, the broadcasters, the auto manufacturers, the drivers, the teams, the tracks, NASCAR, the sponsors, to all work together to try and grow the sport. And that part was really hard. It was also really rewarding once we finally got over the hump that, guys, we have to work together. We're a challenger brand. We can't grow unless we all work together. At the NFL, I think the challenge for me was the status quo. The most powerful words in the English language are the following words. But we have always done it that way. And if you say those words, you win. You get promoted. You can move up. And listen, that's the greatness of the NFL, because when the Pilgrims brought football to the shores of the United States, they brought with them this winning formula, and it's worked for so long and for so many years that it's really hard to, it's not a place where you want to innovate too much. And I don't say that in a bad way, because the product and the culture is good. It's great. It's filled with amazing people. And the product's incredible. It always is. And you don't want to mess with that too much. Obviously there were lots of challenges with race relations when I was there, and seeing Black coaches and GMs get hired and the lack of progress there. But every day was an adventure there. And I treasure every moment that I spent.
All right. Let's see. Let me move to another question here, because I wanted to save some time for you to talk about your sports mentoring program some. But of course, I wanted to ask, and every time we have a guest on here, I always ask this question. But if you could offer just one piece of advice to tomorrow's media professionals, what would that be?
Media in terms of people who will be working as journalists?
Yes, and we could expand that. I mean, just
yeah, I would say
relations, marketing, strategic communicators.
Yeah, I would say always tell the truth, even when it hurts. Now, I think you never lie to, if you're a journalist, you don't lie to somebody who's inside, company. If you're in the media group or PR group, you never lie to a journalist. That the most important ingredient is trust. And if you lie, you erode trust. But I also think speaking the truth to power is extremely important. I'm going to repeat that so that you can write it down. Speaking the truth to power is really important. If you are on the inside and you're not a journalist, you're somebody who's in the media group or PR group, and you're on the inside, and I'm going to use that train analogy. There's a train a mile away. It's going to take 2 miles for it to stop, and it ain't stopping. It's not slowing down, and the train's going to hit us, and really bad things are going to happen. You need to speak that truth to the power inside and let them know that's your job. to look around that corner and say, that train's coming. It's going to cause damage. There will be loss of life. There will be, and downstream, even farther, there will be bad news media coverage. We need to change. We need to change. Leadership is about changing behavior in a positive way. That's it. That's what leadership is. And you could be a leader if you're a coordinator in the PR department by speaking truth to power and saying, this thing that we're doing is going to have negative impact on our brand and our reputation, on our customers, on our fans. We need to talk about it. Now, you may get your head bitten off and you may get scoffed and chastised for even bringing it up. But speaking truth to power is the reason why you're there. Somebody hired you to do a job and you were doing your job. And it's okay if somebody raises their voice and yells at you because they don't like what you have to say. But if it's the truth, you have to say it.
Well, thank you. Sorry, it was very compelling. I was really drawn in. Thank you for that. I wrote down, leadership is about changing behavior in a positive way.
That's it.
Now, could you talk some about your the sports mentoring program that you mentioned when we first came on?
Yeah, leadership is about changing behavior in a positive way. Mentorship is about removing barriers for someone who are unable to do it alone. That's what mentorship is. I'm just going to come here. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to remove that barrier. I'm going to take it away. I'm not pushing you forward or doing your work for you. I'm just removing the barrier. And that's what the sports mentoring project is all about. Throughout my career, I've had people who have given me a very special gift. It's called time. They've given me time to just talk. Sometimes they didn't give me advice. They just let me talk. Sometimes they offered advice or perspective. But they've lent me their time. They've shown me that they give a crap about me, and they've invested in me, with the gift of their time, and they ask for nothing in return. And I started to think about all the people that have helped me along the way. We all have to have people that help us along the way. Some of them start in your home, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers. Some of them we collect along the way, professors in school or, bosses or whatever. But no matter who they are or how you've come into contact with, these are people that have made time for you without asking anything in return. And I have failed to do a good job in stopping what I'm doing and thanking them. And I was standing in line at a Best Buy, picking up some earphones one day. And I said, I got to call her back. I got to call him back. I got to call them back. I haven't had touch base with them in a while, blah, blah, blah. And I realized today's a great day to thank my mentor. And I decided I would like to create this thing as an homage to my mentors, where we talk about mentoring in sports with some of the biggest personalities in all sports, because there's no better example of mentoring in sports. It's literally built in. Coach, player, executive, junior executive. It is literally built into the ethos of sports. And I want to hear from some of these great people, what drives them? What makes a good mentor? What makes a good mentee? Who are their mentors? What's their superpower? What's driving them? What are the conversations like? What do people need? What do people want? Because here's what I know. You all are members of Gen Z. And you all, whether you acknowledge it or not, you all, research tells us, you all want a best friend at work and you want a mentor at work. Somebody please come off of mute and argue with me. I'm begging you.
Sounds about right.
Right? You want somebody, you want a best friend at work and you want a mentor at work. And you know what? I'm from Gen X. And we work with people who are baby boomers, and they're like, rub some dirt on it. Get the hell out of here, kid. Mentorship. What the hell is that? This is important stuff. How are you supposed to grow without somebody in your corner and giving you advice and making time for you and helping you through a problem and removing a barrier for success? So this is my endeavor to do that. I'm next week. I'm wrapping up my first season. My first few guests were amazing. I had Joe. For those of you who are baseball fans, I had someone named Joe Torre. He was the manager of the New York Yankees. He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Is one of the most iconic figures in Major League Baseball history. And he was talking about mentoring with me. I spoke to Neka Ogwumike, who's the captain of the LA Sparks, #1 draft pick for the WNBA. Went to Stanford. She's brilliant and smart and dynamic and amazing. And we talked about mentoring with her. I spoke with Ian Eagle, who calls March Madness games on CBS. He calls the NBA on TNT. And, he talked about, what it means to be a mentor and he talked about people who helped him along the way. And my guest today was Aeneas Williams. He actually went to Southern University, and he walked on his junior year, and he went on to be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Amazing guy. Next week is going to be hopefully it's going to be Emmanuel Acho, and that'll end season 1. But I've got some other great guests coming up: Doc Emmerich, Kenny Albert, Tony Richardson, Christine Brennan, who's a journalist for USA Today and CNN. You should check that one out. She was tremendous. And a whole host of others. And really, it's not about me. I speak for about 4% of the episode, and I let the guests do all the work. And it's a lot of fun. I'm on Apple and Spotify and wherever podcasts are heard. And check me out. Give a listen. Subscribe. Give a rating. If you're really, if you have insomnia and you can't sleep, I will put you to sleep.
What was the name of the podcast again?
The Sports Mentoring Project with Jon Schwartz. The Sports Mentoring Project. Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and check me out.
Of course, before we ran out of time, I've seen him the whole call.
Thank you, Kate.
The footballs behind you.
Oh, my footballs. Yes, this was I worked on the NFL's 100th season, which was an incredible experience, a chance to look back on 100 years of the NFL, and what a great journey it was to be part of that. And this is my little wall commemorating my 100 years of the NFL. And
let me just ask, are there times, or how do you ever keep from ever being starstruck at times, from working in NASCAR, working in the NFL, just out of curiosity?
Well, look, you were hired to do a job, and if you allow yourself to be starstruck, you're clearly not going to do your job. You should have a purpose in everything that you do. And if you're following through that purpose, and if you're following through the plan you wrote and you developed, you won't be starstruck. You're going to be too busy working. I've had the opportunity to talk to lots of different people and be around some, the commissioner and all of his celebrity friends and things. And it's cool and it's wild and it's crazy. But you know what, I'm there doing a job. And if I lose focus, I'm going to lose my job. So you can't afford to be starstruck. You can't afford to stop and take an autograph or a picture. That's a no-no. You just need to be in the moment, because that is your autograph. That is your selfie. That is your moment that's going to be burned in your brain. And no one will ever be able to take away that story. You got to get over the starstruck thing right away, and then be starstruck after the fact. When you're having a glass of wine with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, then you can be starstruck.
And I know that you had to be impartial, but did you have a favorite team? And was it hard, not to want to root for your favorite team?
Well, we used to say that all 32 teams are the favorite team, but I grew up a Giants fan. I'd always rooted for the New York Football Giants, and certainly I think it's okay to show your fandom a little bit at work, but you know, you definitely have to be as impartial as you can. The right answer is we're rooting for the refs. We're the only ones rooting for the refs. So they need all the help they can get.
All right. Well, I see that we just bumped upon the 8:30 time, and so I want to be respectful of Professor Schwartz's time, but I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight for this conversation. It was fantastic.
Anytime, please, hit me up on LinkedIn, Jon Schwartz 1, Twitter, Jon Schwartz 1, Instagram, Jon Schwartz 1, the Sports Mentoring Project. Professor Armstrong has my email. If anybody needs anything, please let me know. I really wish you all good luck on your journey, whether you end up in journalism or in public relations or media relations, inside or outside of sports. And I encourage you all to find a mentor, one or more mentors, and make it someone who has real good diversity, not just gender and skin color and things, but diversity of thought. Someone who is a different kind of thinker than you are, because it's so easy to gravitate towards people who are like us, and we need other people who are not like us. We need other people to challenge us and make us better. And I wish you all much success for your search for mentors, because I don't think there's anything more important in the workplace.
All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. And Professor Schwartz, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You bet,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
night.
you.